Hello, everyone. This is Will McGee here, and thank you for joining me. I've got Nate Guggia here from Job Portraits. I am super excited about having him on because we just geeked out on some of the really cool features and functions of recruiting and marketing really coming together, and how you can actually bring more talent to your jobs by creating good content, good copywriting, and overall just making sure you understand the target that you're going after. So I'm gonna have Nate introduce himself. Please tell the people who you are, man.
Yeah, thanks so much. That was a great introduction. Yeah, I'm Nate Guggia. I lead brand marketing for a company called Job Portraits. We do something pretty unique in the market. We're a creative studio that specializes specifically in employer branding content for high growth startups. And so I know that's a lot of layers of niche right there. But yeah, I mean we partner with talent teams to help them tell the most amazing stories at their company and market it in a way that will bring awareness and help attract highly competitive talent in really competitive markets. So our clients are primarily in the Bay Area, New York, Seattle, like those like really hot spots where people are really trying to like attract engineers and highly skilled salespeople and things like that. So when it comes to content, specifically about employer branding, like that's just like really like our area of expertise. So, and we can dive a lot more into that.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, Nate is a fantastic resource. And if you guys haven't been following him on LinkedIn, I highly suggest it. He brings up all the good knowledge bombs for any hiring manager or recruiter really looking to attract the talent. And I mean, we both work in the same markets, Bay Area, New York, LA. I've worked them all, and they are very hard, positions to fill. There's the talent pool's very limited. There's the job postings all kind of meld together, if you will. They all this approaching sameness kind of mentality of, just the basic information. And how do you with
Yeah.
employer branding coming out as such a big sector over the past few years now, could you kind of dive into really quickly, like, what do you think employer branding is and
Yeah.
what it is not, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good question. Employer branding, especially in the United States and especially in like the world that we're talking about, which is like growth stage companies, who've raised around, they have big hiring needs. I mean, I'm seeing now too, like just to take a step back of that from that, like even with the current climate and things that are happening, there's still startups that I'm talking to who are hiring at a pretty large scale.
Oh yeah.
So I think like everything we're talking about absolutely applies to the market still. But there's also things that we should talk about that apply to people who are like just, or companies that are just on pause.
Hmm.
But to take a step back from that, employer branding is like a pretty fuzzy term. In the world of startups, it's now just finally becoming a thing that like is acknowledged by the industry. Now, if you bring up employer branding, at least people's ears will perk up and they'll understand somewhat of what you're talking about.
Hmm.
But it's been a hard fight to get that level of like awareness and credibility that it deserves. But I think like after you strip away like all the buzzwords and all the fluffy terminology, employer branding it's what candidates believe, true or not, about what it's like to work at your company. And that perception, it exists regardless of what you do, right?
Hmm.
It's mostly out of your control. And employer branding is the opportunity to gain a level of influence over that perception. Okay. So what you talked about just a bit ago is that in the world of tech startups, for the most part, to candidates, especially when it comes to like engineers who are like now like highly sought after, most companies look more or less the same.
Oh
Unless
yeah.
you're like one of the big well-known brands that just has this like established market credibility, like you really have to do something to differentiate yourself. And now what we're seeing because of what's happening with this crisis, different things matter. this isn't a month or two ago. And so I think the opportunity for companies to like tell really great human-centered stories is just like, it's greater than ever. And that's how we can talk a little bit about how employer branding is shifting. But anyway, that's how I see it.
Totally. And what like so the word has or the term has come up quite a bit a lot in the last 2 years, like you had said, and there is more understanding as to what it's about, and there's definitely some details that people feel like they have a grasp on. But where is it that people are really just not getting about what employer branding is? Because like we can talk about
Yeah.
the attraction rates. We can with a job posting, we can see how many people apply. Where does employer branding fall into the metrics of it all?
Okay. Um, for startups, employer branding it sits so close to talent acquisition. It is a it's a it's a recruiting strategy. Like, let's say like bare bones, it's lead generation. That's what it comes down to, right? It's about like I was saying, how can you create awareness and start attracting types of candidates that you want, right? When you talk about like larger companies, employer branding can play different roles, but like that's not really the world that I live in. And so like it's content marketing. It's things that like brand and marketing professionals have been doing for years, and now it's just translating over to the talent side of things. And so it is it comes down to like a couple key pillars. It's like understanding who you are as an organization. Like what do you truly stand for as a company? Like what is your uniqueness, right? It's not about like what you do, it's about who you are. And then it's creating content at scale that maps back to that uniqueness. And then if you can do that and market that content in all the places that your candidates live online, then you will start building up a level of awareness. It's the same stuff that marketing has been doing for a long time. And it's just like there's this opportunity on the talent side to like see what their peers are doing or their colleagues are doing on that side of the fence and just like take this and apply it directly to talent. It's like, yes, there are some nuances to it, but like more or less it's the same kind of thing. It's just a different type of audience.
Man, and I've been geeking out about this for quite a bit, right? I'm lucky enough to have a cousin in the marketing side of things. He's actually
Yeah.
mentored me on my marketing, and shout out to Vince Reed. But he's been showing me some of the things that they do and the ability to attract people and pixel people and really just start following them where they are and making sure that you're reaching out to the candidates where they are by understanding them and really creating out like strong customer or candidate portfolios and
Yeah.
avatars for these people, right? And like to me it's common sense, right? It's like, okay, I can totally see how marketing, sales, and recruiting are all kind of aligned. If you're a salesperson or a marketer, you're basically a recruiter, but just for customers, right? You're trying to bring people in. So and vice versa for us. So why has it been such a hard time for the market to really adopt it? Like
Yeah.
what is really holding us back at this point?
Yeah. I think it's a couple things. So recruiting historically has been just a very transactional function. I mean, it's like, and so has sales, right? I think now, like on the consumer side, if we're just going to look at like consumer buyer behavior, um, that market is like forcing things to be non-transactional or to be buyers now want to get themselves as far down the funnel as they possibly can before they absolutely have to talk to somebody, right? It's like I want to do my own research. I want to talk to my own peer group. I want to do back channel references. I want to get recommendations. I want to do all of that. And then like when I know that like I've narrowed it down to maybe a couple options, that's when I actually want to talk to somebody and see this thing, do a demo, do a free trial, try this product out, whatever it might be, right? But that's like 60% down the funnel. And so like buyers, in my opinion, are forcing that now, and sales is being, as a result, is having to reciprocate and just be less transactional and less pushy. Now, on the recruiting side of things, that's what's happening, but there hasn't been these like measures in place to help recruiters. There's a couple things to help recruiters focus on more of this like long-term buyer behavior, candidate
Yeah.
behavior, for
Yeah.
one, and also two, recruiters are incentivized by the wrong things. So it's like if you're incentivized by transactional behavior, you might be sitting here going like, yeah, like I totally get it, but that's not how I get paid. There's like a big difference. And so I think that's like, there's a mindset that needs to shift on the talent side. And I talked to some people who absolutely have it, and they are like, we're building a brand. That's what it's about. I mean, you can do the best of both worlds. If you have big hiring goals and you have to fill seats, you can still do it in a way that isn't like super transactional and pushy.
Yep.
But I think you have to have this like long-term vision and brand building still going on all the time, right?
It always has to be running in the background, right?
It always has to be.
And it always has to be updating. That's and just to even speak to that, I mean, you're talking on the internal perspective, but even on the external side, as an agency, that was one of the big reasons I left big agency, was because it is completely incentivized based on the incorrect metrics. It's based on how many deals I can get done today, which, we're in sales. You want to get them done as fast as possible, and you want to get those deals in the books. But at the same time, for me, I just have this moral obligation where if this is someone's livelihood, right? And I don't want to place someone in a company that's just not going to fit for my reputation, and for the candidate's reputation, just moving forward. Like that's not gonna help anyone in the end, right?
Right.
And so for me, and just to touch on that, it's funny because we did a bit of an experiment when I was over at Tima, and shout out to Tima, they're great. But when I was at Tima, we would post positions that we had onto our LinkedIn profile, just as like, hey, we've got this role open.
Yeah.
And we got no traction, right? And instead, we started engaging with the candidates in that pool. And instead of just like posting the job or sending them a job description, it was describing what's going on in the industry or why you should look at this industry or whatever it might be, and attracting them into what I call a funnel, and nurturing them. And as a result, whenever I would post a job in that space, I mean, the shares and the comments and the amount of traction I would just get just from that job posting would be 10 times greater than if I would have posted online, right? Just a standard job posting on Indeed or whatever it might be. Because like you said, like it's just, people are just going through and swiping right at the end of the day when it comes into that. But when a company understands your brand, either internally or externally, it just makes it so much easier for them to get behind you and want to help you, right?
Yeah.
So
No, it's like, no, 100%. We've done a lot of research with candidates on the market, and we continue to do it, to find out what are the things they care about, what kind of content do they want to see, what forms of content, all that kind of stuff. Like as it applies to like the candidates that the growth stage startups are trying to attract.
yeah.
And so like, I definitely want to make sure that we talk about market research, because I think like that is something that good marketers have built into their process, and talent does not.
Exactly.
On
That's actually,
any level.
that's a good segue, because my next question is, where does one begin? And I think it all starts with market research, right?
It does. And market. And so like, now if we look at like employer branding, and the actual hidden benefit of employer branding is that it can build an amazing culture. Because there's a couple things that happen. This is why content, in my opinion, is like, it's such a gem and people don't realize it. It's like content is created to attract and also to connect. And so it can attract externally, but it can connect internally.
Yes.
And we see this happen when we go into to companies and we create, a number of pieces of content, and we do this thing called a launch day where we work with them to like all the employees to like share out the content. And what ends up happening is when they see these pieces that we write on their peers pulled up, they just like light up and they go, "Oh, that's like so and so, look at that," and all of a sudden they just have this internal morale and connection to like other functions, the work that other people are doing. They see that their company cares enough to like write stories about team members.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff is internal culture building. And so I think like if we're talking about markets, there's two markets. One market is your internal employees. You absolutely have to start with like asking them who you are as an organization.
Yep.
And trust me, like now that's changed, right? Who you were pre-COVID is different than you are now.
Yeah.
And so that can be done with like internal surveys, interviews. There's like a lot of different like levers you can pull with that, but like talk to your employees, but that's usually where it stops when it comes to employer branding, because that part's easy. You have access to those people.
Yep.
I think there's this like hidden level of like fear that's built into talking to the market, but people need to get over that because marketers have gotten over that.
Yeah.
And like there's companies you can use, like we personally use user interviews, but like you can go out, there are candidates on the market who like want to talk objectively and give feedback about your organization. And just like going out to like these candidate personas and saying like, here's our process. Like, this is our candidate experience. What do you think about our employer brand? Where do you see gaps in the market? How do you think we face it, like, or match up like with our competitors? Like, do you even know what we do? Dude, when we do employer brand audits, it's amazing how often we come across companies and we're like, what the hell do you even do? Like,
Yeah. Creating
like I don't
synergies
even,
in your process. Like
yeah,
what are these
yeah,
keywords here?
yeah. Like, what is this? Like, yeah, are you trying to trick me? So, but yeah, I mean, it's like all that stuff. And then you take that research and you find out what people like really care about. And then you create content that matches what they care about.
Yeah.
And that takes a level of thoughtfulness. It takes a little bit of time, but that's the place to start. And that builds the foundation for everything else that you can go and create. So
There's two things I want to bring up because you actually hit it right on the head. So one of my favorite conferences, Traffic and Conversion Summit in San Diego. I'd never been to a really big marketing conference, and Ryan Dice brought up his client journey, right, or his
okay.
customer journey. And when I saw that map of a customer journey, the light just went off. And it was like, well, why aren't we doing this for our candidates? I mean, some savvy internal recruiters are definitely doing this, but the external side is less privy to this. So, and I always try and bring this up to anybody who's an agency recruiter, is it's not just about finding the candidate and getting them on board or like having an idea of what they want, but really understanding on a deep level what's going on, what problems they're having, and how to attract them in a real way. Because if you're trying to attract passive candidates specifically, like they're happy, they're not moving. So you'd have to understand the market and really understand what their problems are. And the only way you can do that is by asking questions and
Yeah.
getting in front of them and making sure that you understand that. On the internal side, though, it's really interesting when you do design think how the process goes and making sure everybody's happy and excited about joining into the process and committing to it. It changes the game. You
Yeah.
have way more candidate control, if you will, as we like to say, but you just have more of their attention. And so creating that avatar in a tactical level is a really awesome thing. So like when you go out to the market and ask those questions, you said you're using user interviews to do that. is there anything else that you're implementing to trying to find out that those details regarding the candidate avatar or the persona, if you will?
So when we do work, um, it depends on the type of work that we're doing. If we're doing like highly strategic work, where we're doing like internal facing content, external facing content, um, doing a lot of like values work in companies, we do at a really large scale internal interviews and external interviews and gap analysis and things like that. Now, if we're doing, but then, so because the companies that we work with, in many ways, as far as like talent acquisition goes, they're kind of similar. They're like all in the kind of the same market.
Yeah.
So that's all transferable knowledge that can go over to like if somebody partners with us just to like produce content for them, right?
Yeah.
Um, we also do that independent research just on our own, just to stay up to date on the market. We do that periodically throughout the year. Fortunately, we do enough of these strategic projects where like it kind of takes care of that as well. But then I'll tell you what I do on a personal level, which is like, I mean, it's attached to the business anyway.
Yeah.
So because of like the belief that I and we as a company have in brand, and like what I've worked really hard on with LinkedIn over the last like 10 months is like building up this level of brand awareness around like me and job portraits and like employer branding and just in general, right? Like
Yeah.
level, like hopefully elevating the level of awareness around the industry. I've been able to like be patient and build really great relationships with people who would be our buyers, but like I'm not trying to sell them anything. They're just like
Exactly.
friends now. They're
Yeah.
like heads of talent or employer brand leaders at some amazing companies who I'm just like straight up like friends with. And
Yeah.
like I reach out to them and we have virtual coffees and we just like talk shop and like they tell me what they're seeing in the market and I bounce ideas off them. And
Yeah.
what that does is it like one, it makes sure that like that I'm never assuming anything,
Hmm.
that I'm like that I'm always just like at like the forefront of what's happening in the market with the people who are in the seat. Um, and they're just giving me like really great feedback to help us like either tweak our services to better serve our clients and things like that. And I really encourage talent professionals to take that approach because having great relationships with just smart candidates that you're not trying to sell on anything is just like, it's
It's
super valuable.
it's the best thing you could possibly do.
It
And
really
I think
is. Yeah.
it's the it's the one part where we going back to the transactional nature of our business, it's the one thing that most likely will not lead to a deal, but will help you in the long run tenfold. Because if you have a really strong relationship with the candidates that you're serving and just having good conversations without having to sell them, at the end of the day, like when you do have a role that actually fits their experience or whatever it is, it's going to be a good deal. But on top of that, they're going to help you find out what the market really wants. They're going to push you to the right people. We live in a referral business, right? So having a good referral is it's worth its weight in gold. So it's one of those things where we have to. But let's talk about LinkedIn, for example,
Sure.
for a minute here. So
Yeah.
I, as far as user knowledge or user research or research in general on our candidates, LinkedIn has become one of the most valuable pieces for us because if you really have your finger on the pulse and you're listening to what people are talking about and you can comment and see what's getting engaged with
Yeah.
and then re-comment that and reshare it and repost it, it's the fastest way to build out that user research without having to spend a lot of money. And I
Yeah.
think it's been critical in my aspect of our business. But what are you seeing? What's your thoughts on it?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because, like, I've noticed this just with you, for example. Like, I've been, like I said, heavy on LinkedIn for like 9 or 10 months. I've lived in that world like pretty consistently for that period of time. And then all of a sudden, like, you came up, and now like I see you popping up in like a bunch so like you're part of conversations now. And like, so I just like wanted to give you kudos for like really practicing what you're preaching right now, because like you're popping up a lot in conversations. And what you're probably seeing is that like by you providing the level of feedback that you are doing, you're getting ideas for your own content.
Yep.
It's making you like really think about I just like about thoughts and opinions and about the industry and stuff. It's just like it's turning a switch on that it's easy to like let that be dormant. But
Yeah.
like once that switch goes on, dude, it's like off to the races. You're just thinking about this stuff all the time,
Yeah.
bouncing it off people, and like the whole thing kind of snowballs. And so I think like LinkedIn, you said it so well that I think it should first be a listening tool, then it should be an engagement tool, and then a content tool. I think people take it they take the wrong approach. It's like, I have to start creating content for LinkedIn. And then you're creating content off of assumptions or with the wrong intention, right? And so if you start listening and participating, the best way to recreate, or to create rather, content is like, if you comment on people's stuff and you see that gets good feedback, that is your next idea or potentially your next post.
Yep.
So.
I did that exact same thing. So like, I've never had real virality, if you will, to my posts. And it was because even though when I said I was going to commit to LinkedIn 2 years ago and creating a brand, I was doing it a lot on assumptions. It wasn't based on what actually is happening. And what I thought with my marketing mind was like, this sounds good. This is a good sound bite. This looks good. This is a good brand bite. But in reality, it just wasn't getting the attraction because no one cared, right? So
it wasn't relevant.
It wasn't relevant. So now when I took, and this goes to Chris Walker, who actually did the piece on this, which it changed my whole game. And in 3 weeks, and granted, like, we're lucky because everyone's on LinkedIn right now, but in 3 weeks, we were able to take advantage of that shift. And my network has grown 1,000 people and 1,000 followers and more engagement. I had my very first 900 like or engaged post. I was shocked by it, right? Didn't
amazing.
expect it. Now, on average, most of my posts get between 40 to 90 likes, depending on what it is, right? All of it's still based on that relevance on what the consumer or the candidates and my clients and the recruiting industry as a whole is talking about. It's not it's not rocket science. It's just, I'm just putting my 2 cents in, my view, my lens on it. And it's awesome.
Yeah. That's okay, so that's the thing when it comes to what's the like to having an impact is like having a unique thought or perspective or opinion or a fresh take on something that is being talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's not just regurgitating information, or it's not posting something that is like extremely likable, because there's like plenty of stuff you could post that is like extremely likable.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't matter. It's about like the way to like show up and have people go like, oh, that person, maybe even if I slightly disagree or fully disagree with them, like that's something that's making me think. The
Mm-hmm.
goal is to make people think. And like, I think like when you look at engagement, it's not about numbers. It's about who is following you on a consistent basis, and what is that world that you're creating look like? Because it's a hell of a lot better to have 10 people engage with your content who are all in your industry. They might be your buyer. They might, they all fit like those personas, than it is to have like 150 who are just like kind of all over the board or whatever.
Yep.
But if you can do that consistently and show up and be unique and provide something unique around a topic that is relevant, people will start to catch on. And I want to give like Chris Walker. I started following Chris probably about a year ago. I really saw him as somebody who had like something special. Like it wasn't like he was just posting stuff that was good. It was like, this guy's got something special. And so I reached out to him early on, and like I've had like, we've developed a friendship because I was like, dude, like you're doing cool stuff, and I'm like a big fan now. And
Yeah.
so like he's been like really influential in just like helping me figure this stuff out. And I think like he's the real deal. That guy's legit.
Yeah, I think I actually discovered Chris Walker because of your comments on him.
Oh really?
And
Yeah.
yeah, and ever since I've just been hooked. So I love his Thursday nights or his Wednesday nights, and then his Wednesday night webinars with I forget his name, the guy from Sales Hacker. But
Oh yeah, yeah.
they crush it. So
Yep.
let's go into some of the things that we're talking about in a little bit more in detail, because you had just mentioned it specifically about how we measure engagement, right? And a lot of times in recruiting, because we're in this world of we need to make this go fast, we need to get someone in today, it's really hard for a company to commit to a long-term play when their short-term results aren't really necessarily coming in. So what should a company expect when they do employ a really strong employer branding or an engagement tool on LinkedIn or wherever they're distributing? What kind of results should they expect, and how long should it take for them?
Yeah. That's a good question. So like I said at the beginning, um, for startups, employer branding is lead gen. And so if you look at creating content, we look at content as like sales enablement for recruiting. Um, for these companies, inbound is probably pretty limited unless you have like a really known brand. Um, and whatever inbound you do receive is probably the quality is questionable. And so I'm going to talk to that, how content plays into that. So if you're looking at like primarily outbound recruiting, which is primarily outbound sales, how do you position that in a way to where it is more marketing focused instead of transactional sales focused? Instead of saying like, hey, do you want this job? It's more like, hey, even if you're not ready, here's a look inside of our company, whatever way you want to message it. But like, I think if recruiters are doing a cadence of outbound messages, having content pieces linked in every one of those steps is critical. And there's different stories to tell at different stages of the funnel, right? There's different stories that create awareness, and then there's different types of stories that dial down and give like details. But what we see when recruiters use content in their outbound messaging is you see like an immediate spike in just overall response rates, which is like what you're looking for. You're looking for like sales metrics, basically.
Yep.
It's like response rates. Um, and at the same time, all of this content can be marketed to start building longer term brand awareness. So I think it actually solves both problems. It's like you're going to get better short term results because you're reaching out to candidates in a way like you're giving them the information to start researching your company. They're
Yep.
going to be doing this anyway on their own. You're going at their pace.
Yep.
They're going to find information. Give them the information you want them to see.
Yeah. And
That's what you got to do.
I think this talks a lot on, again, where I think the problem in agency recruiting is, right? Because companies view an agency recruiter as someone who's just going to go get them a candidate. And yeah, that's our goal, right? Go get me a candidate, get them excited, and close the deal. Sure. Absolutely. We could definitely do that. But hiring on 15 other recruiters to do that ultimately just kind of diminishes that ability for us to really create an experience for a candidate that where when they do come to your company and they do come to your site and they have your interview, they're just more engaged and interested. They're easier to close, if you will, because they already know that they want this opportunity because you've answered all those questions. And I think one of the things that we geeked out on the last thing we talked about was the depth that you could actually go in some of this content when someone can go down the rabbit hole, if you will, and now they know how to answer, or they know what the questions that they have answered are, the frequently asked questions that you might have posted, or details about the position that maybe not are not described in the job description, and they might not even apply, but later down the line when you reach out to them and you engage with them, it just becomes so much easier for you to be like, are you interested in this role? And they know, you know, if that's the case, right?
Yeah.
So that long-term play is something that I've found either internal teams either get it or they don't. And if they don't get it, they end up kind of spinning their wheels with a bunch of different candidates that they won't be a fit for the company. So one thing that I've been looking at is looking at how we can partner with companies like Job Portraits, right? So we can offer a better product or a better service to our retained clients and saying, hey, we can create this digital function and you guys handle that while we go fill the role, right? And handle
Yeah.
that whole process. So what are your thoughts on that in the recruiting industry? Like, I think that's a win for any agency right now. That's
Yeah.
really is really dedicated to placing people.
Yep. I'm a big advocate for that to happen. I think that in all the conversations that I've had with agency recruiters, they all say like, we don't get we don't get any of the assets we'd want. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of companies we're working with have like shoddy career site, like they're giving us nothing to work with.
Nothing.
Nothing, right? And so I've like for the longest time, I look at the work that we do, and I've been like, man, if an agency can build out a creative arm and be that type of partner for their client, who can go in and pitch creative work on why it's going to help them attract better talent, it's going to make your job as a recruiter easier. It's going to end up saving them money, probably. They're going to have better retention as a result of it. It's going to, and also too, it makes that relationship so much stickier.
Mm.
It's like, that's the thing. It's like, you're not now just this like transactional order filler. You're like an actual partner.
Yeah.
And, uh, and I think that's something that like the industry itself has wanted for a really long time. And I think creative work is a way to like really kind of solidify that. And I realize that it's like, it's easier said than done, because creative work just alone is really hard. Um, it's hard. It's like, there's like, I mean, the work that we do, like we operate like a newsroom. We have like a full editorial team, like 5 rounds of editing on like every piece that we put out. And it's like, there's a lot of research that goes into creating just like one piece of content. I understand all of that, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done. And there's a lot of creative people out there
Yeah.
who are passionate about the people side of business. And I think this is like the world for them. Like, this is the place where you can tell really human stories, bring them to life, help people get really great jobs, do a wonderful service for companies, and fulfill a piece that the vast majority of companies are just straight up missing on. Like,
They're just skipping
seriously.
out. It's it because like long-term strategy is the key here, right? I mean, if I'm a
And
company, I
yeah,
want to be attracting people all the time. Like, you don't stop attracting customers because you have enough sales. Like, that's never a thing,
dude,
right? Why would you
oh my
stop
God.
attracting talent just because your jobs are filled, right? You want to always be presenting the desire to join your company, and it becomes one of those things where people will start just flooding the gates with interest, And my goal for all my clients, whenever I work with them, is in whatever area you're in, every single candidate that is going to fit that role should know about you. And not just know about you, but really be interested in you based on what we talked about.
Yep.
So how do you do that at scale? It's the only way you can do it is through digital content creation and all that stuff. So it just goes back to that stickiness that you're talking about. When you're a recruiter on an agency, or this really goes out to independent recruiters, like how do you really create a really strong, sticky brand for yourself when there's plenty of other recruiters that are just vying for business and will send a resume and contingency? How do you even compete? You can't. You can't really compete in that realm because you probably don't have all the skills or all the tools and the database and everything like that. But you can compete on creative. You can compete with a
You can.
partnership. So if you just create that stickiness and maybe just take on one or two of the roles that they might want and come in, bring a job portraits on, and you got a really solid, partnership there where it will change the game for you. So I'm
Yeah.
big.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned something um, that I've been thinking about a lot. I posted something about this like a week or two ago, and it was like on the consumer side, they're they're always thinking about what pivot needs to be made, how they can speak to a buyer better, basically how to drive revenue and make more money for the company, right? And so I was like, man, brand and marketing is thinking hard about this stuff right now. If you're in talent, you better be thinking about this too, because like they are all that part of their brain is always on.
Mm-hmm.
And here also too, we've been talking a lot about long term. I want to just help define a little bit what long term actually means. Long term means 6 to 12 months.
Yeah,
It
it's
doesn't mean
not that long.
it's not 5 years from now. It's just not tomorrow. But do you know how fast 6 to 12 months goes? Like, if you look at the sales cycle for an enterprise software, that's the sales cycle. And so if we're talking about candidates, especially in the market right now, consistently building brand for 6 to 12 months in a market that is different than buyers who are pretty numb right now to being pitched software, it's probably shorter than that, right? Because what I mean by that is you can stand out so much easier if you're a thoughtful talent leader with awesome content.
Yeah.
So I think the sales cycle is actually shorter, the brand cycle. But man, 6 to 12 months is nothing to invest in.
It's funny because 12 months ago I was getting ready to go get married to my wife, and literally that year went by so fast. I I can't even explain how fast that was. I don't know why we're
Yeah.
talking about it. It's like we're about to have our anniversary right now, and it's not that
Yeah,
long
man.
ago. It feels like
No.
it feels like it was yesterday. So
Yeah.
creating that content just 3 months ago, it was January, right?
Seriously.
it was New Year's. It's felt like a very long time though, with COVID and everything, but it doesn't take
Seriously. I know. No, it doesn't take that long.
no.
And for a lot of teams now who there's a couple different buckets for internal teams that they fall into right now. It's one, you're just still totally hiring.
Mm,
Or your team's still intact, but you're just on pause right now, you're playing it safe.
mm,
Or unfortunately for some, the team isn't there anymore. But if you fall into the bucket of you're on pause, but you're just kind of waiting things out, I mean, now's the time to start doing all the stuff that you just have never had time to do. And that's a big problem with talent teams is for the most part, they're straight up hair on fire, big hiring goals, limited bandwidth, and also limited skill set. Or their skill set there that just isn't able to be expressed. And I think now is just a wonderful time to even create stuff and test it on your internal market.
yeah.
That's I've talked to a lot of talent leaders who are really taking that approach, and I love it because they're just really capitalizing on on the opportunity to have space and time, which they don't normally have. And it's really, really valuable.
I talked about that my last post is just like we're type A. Most of the great recruiters I know are type A. Just go, go, go. We need to get things done, right?
For sure, yeah.
And it's hard for type A's to be able to sit back, be introspective, or look at things when things aren't, like you said, when your hair's not on fire. So it's difficult. Some of them get depressed. Some just freak out, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I have a good friend who has been just stressed out for the last 3 months. He started his recruiting agency 3 months ago. And I kept on telling him, like, it's not going to happen right overnight. It's going to take about 3 to 6 months. Be okay with it. Finally closed his first deal. He's finally okay now. But during that time, he was just like, I don't know what to do with myself. What do I do with my hands? Right. And it is a good time to look back at what's working, what's not, to be able to implement stuff that you might have been wanting to jump on for weeks, if not years, create those case studies internally that help out, and then just go prove it to the market. Because now, like, everyone's looking.
That's the thing. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Okay. I know.
So before I let you go, I know we only have a few minutes here left, and we talked about it. Microcultures.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's a term that we understand, but just for anybody who doesn't understand that, like, a lot of brands, a lot of companies, when they take on an employer branding initiative, they're looking at it in this perspective of the company. How does the company look? Yeah. And one of the big things we've been pushing on our end is creating a more micro culture, meaning like a culture within the culture. So the engineering team's culture has its own culture versus the sales team's culture is going to have their own culture. And being able to position that in a content basis, or creating good white papers, or not white papers, job descriptions, or whatever it might be. How does one really discover that microculture and be able to let it shine? And what's the importance of it, do you think?
Yep. That's a really good question. And this is an important topic because I think, like, organizational culture, it's always been a buzzy term, even more so now, because that side of companies is just being more exposed due to this crisis. But I think, like, the reality is that on the day-to-day, employees don't live in the larger organizational culture. They spend their time in the microculture that is their team and their function. Especially at larger organizations, that's even more siloed. Mm. And so each of these little microcultures collectively makes up this larger organizational culture. But if you're speaking to a candidate, you need to tell the stories that come from that little world.
Yes.
And so engineering is totally different than sales, and it's totally different than product or design or whatever, And so I think that conceptually this makes a lot of sense, but this type of initiative needs to be led by somebody. It needs to be instigated. And I think, like, the talent side of things, the people side of a organization needs to go to the leaders of those different functions and say, like, I want to start telling stories that represent your microculture, the things that you guys care about. What makes your engineering team so different than whoever X competitor is? Because there's certain things that make them different. They're working on very unique things, solving like certain challenges, using a certain stack, have a mentality. Leadership has a certain approach. Like, those are all things that candidates want to know before they would even consider joining that type of team. And there's different types of content for each team that resonates more than others. So for instance, like, an engineering blog is like a no-brainer for every engineering team, but it's hard to turn out because engineers aren't usually the best writers and they don't typically have a lot of bandwidth. But if you could have somebody come in and be the writing arm or the ghostwriter and interview the engineers and tell those stories and let them have a voice. An engineering blog is one of the best ways to get organic traffic from engineers. Engineers want to learn from other smart engineers. And if you can build up a following there, that's great. I think on the sales side, LinkedIn, um, LinkedIn is a huge opportunity for smart sales leaders to start putting out their own unique thoughts, opinions, perspectives on their industry and on their leadership style. And I think they need to use LinkedIn organic as a talent acquisition measure, not a sales measure. It's not about selling, it's about helping the talent team attract awesome salespeople. And that's where sales leaders can shine. Same with marketers. There's a couple marketers right now on LinkedIn that I love their stuff. And if I was a smart marketer, like I would want to go work for them. And so, and like if you have a strong design team, a design blog that is sexy, visually appealing, that kind of stuff would work really well. And if you're a founder, Twitter is like huge. And so, and I think like founders really need to start putting themselves out there and start telling their stories more, because it's time for them to like also be content creators. And there's different levers you can pull inside to help like make that lift a little bit easier. So anyway, so that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, and then just the humanization of it on the founder side, right? If you're
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
a founder and people look at you as a founder, like you're going to be a thought leader, don't be afraid to just make a few mistakes here and there and really create, authentic content. Like that's going to be the best thing you can possibly do because you're going to attract the right people to come to work for you, right?
yeah,
So, but I've seen a lot of blogs out there that crush, and
yes,
it's really cool to see what's actually happening. There's a guy on the Tinder side, I believe. He just started creating the blog and posting more and more of what they're doing and how they're using React, for example. And
exactly.
it's perfect.
It's
It
perfect.
is
That's the stuff.
perfect.
Yep.
Um, well, man, I really appreciate your time today, and I know you've got to go. You're a busy, man. So thank you so much for giving us some knowledge bombs here. And if anybody wanted to reach out to Job Portraits and to you specifically, how would they get in contact with you?
Yeah. Thanks for asking. Nate at jobportraits.com is my email, or just check out jobportraits.com. I'm pretty sure my face pops up on there. So,
You're all literally all over the place. Like,
yeah, you can do that, or you can message me on LinkedIn. But yeah, it'd be cool. Like, check us out. We have a lot of case studies and examples of our work and all kinds of stuff. So.
awesome. I'll also, if, with your permission, of course, I'll also put some links of some of the case studies that you've done,
Sure.
and some of the videos that you've created for companies like Medallia and Google. What you did with
Yeah.
Medallia is phenomenal. I think
Thank you.
it is some really great content.
Thanks.
So I'm really excited to share that with the audience. So
Please.
thank you again. Have a great rest of the week, and stay safe out there, man.
Yeah. Thanks, man. I really appreciate the time. This has been fun.
Awesome.